do think we have to learn to forgive ourselves, because I think too many times we can beat ourselves up to the point where it's hard for us to turn it into a positive and realize that we learn from mistakes and realize that we're all human.
Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Shafer of Talks with Dr. Shafer. I'm so glad you're here for this amazing episode today. I'm a physician, mom, life coach, musician, author, publisher, and I'm passionate about helping others reclaim their stories so that they can build their most beautiful futures. And I am so excited. I have such a treat for you here today. I love learning. And for me, the best conversations are with people who I can learn from the way they show up in the world to the message they share and the impact they make. Those are the things that get me really excited to speak with someone. Today, I am honored to have a guest on the show who inspires me every single time I hear him speak. The incredible, humble, and kind Joe Schmit. Joe Schmit has had an impactful career as a speaker, the 19 Emmy award-winning sports broadcaster, the author of the children's book, The Right Thing to Do, as well as the amazing books, Silent Impact and The Impact Blueprint. Joe is an advocate for kindness who is active in his community and beyond, raising money for charities that are helping the people of Minnesota thrive and reclaim their stories. Joe, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, Schaefer, it is an honor, and it's great to see you again. You're such a positive light, and I think we connect that way, trying to spread a little positivity in the world.
Oh, Joe, thank you so much for saying that, and I couldn't agree more. I am so genuinely inspired by you every time we meet, and I am so excited to learn from you and to hear all the amazing things you're doing. And also, what I want to share today with people is the path that got you here, because I think, especially with someone like yourself who is so well spoken, so generous with your message and with your time and your purpose on this earth, it's easy to look at you and think you've had this all figured out the whole time, right? And you just had this beautiful blueprint. And so I love having the opportunity to have you on the show to share where it all started, what lessons you've learned along the way, and from those lessons, why you're so passionate about what you're doing now, to not only, we kind of get out of that time in our life where we're go, go, go and achieve, achieve, achieve. And then we take a breath, we look back and we say, how do I want to share this and inspire the next generation who are maybe at a different part of their life than I am, to take those steps to really build the most beautiful life and story for themselves and for the people in their lives. Could you share with us how you got started in broadcasting? What made you want to share your voice in that way?
Well, when I was a kid, I was like many youngsters. I was a sports fanatic. I played every sport I possibly could play, and I played them all pretty average. And I wanted to be a pro athlete. I didn't care whether it was baseball, football. I didn't care. I wanted to be a pro athlete. And at a certain point, when I realized I was not going to be a pro athlete, somebody said to me, you know, Schmit, with your big mouth and your passion for sports, you ought to be a sportscaster. And literally, that was the impact somebody made on me. From that day on, I thought about it and I said, I want to be a television sportscaster. So it changed my life. It changed my focus. It changed my purpose. I went to school. I'm one of the rare people that went to college knowing exactly what I wanted to do. And that's what I did. And the journey was not a straight line, as most journeys aren't. I had ups and downs. I had, at times that things went haywire, but I just kind of hung in there because I always had the passion to do this. I remember I was just talking to some friends this weekend, and we talked about the first job. And my first job in television, I was making $135 a week without overtime. And I was working all these hours. And I was offered a job that for $16,000 a year, basically twice what I was making. And it was outside the sports business. And all my friends were driving cars and had all this nice thing. I'm driving an old beat up Ford LTD. It was green with rust trim. That's what I like to say. And, but I decided this is what I really wanted to do. It's what I went to school for. It's what my passion is. Everybody always says, do something you really want to do. And for whatever reason, I was smart enough at that time not to listen to the other voices. And I think that when I was at that age, I did listen to other voices. There was peer pressure. If somebody told me that was a bad shirt, I would never wear that shirt again. So I always look at that moment where, I kind of went deep down in my soul and said, this is what I really want to do. I shouldn't care about money right now. And it eventually worked out.
So inspiring because it's so true. And I think when we're at that early stage of our life, all of those voices can be so impactful. We're really biologically, neurologically wired to care what our community thinks because it's survival, right? It's survival that we fit in with our community.
Well, and if I look back, it's interesting as you get older, you get wiser. At least you should, because of experience. And if I wasted my time on something, I wasted my time on what other people thought. And I think that's a very human trait. But as you get a little older, I guess you just don't care as much, or maybe you learn that it really doesn't matter because they don't really care about you anyway. So what makes you feel good? What makes you tick? What makes you, the person that you want to be? Which, by the way, do you want me to change this shirt? I'm not sure if I like this shirt or not.
Love that you pose that. And by the way, everybody, go on YouTube and just search Joe Schmit and listen to all of his speeches because he's just such a brilliant speaker and he has such a disarming way of bringing up topics and really making you think, just like he did right there. Because when you say something like that, it makes you realize, oh my gosh, how ridiculous that you would give someone that power over you and not trust yourself so much. But the thing is, we have these thoughts all the time. We have these moments where we really question ourselves and we are asking for permission to be. And that's why it really brings me to something about your book, your incredible book. And I'm going to show it here, The Right Thing to Do, inspired by, of course, the Baseball Hall of Famer, Joe Mauer, and this incredible book that you have written about embracing kindness. And the reason I think it's so important is, like you said, whether we want to believe it or not, our kids, even our young adults, and even us some days, we are absorbing the messaging around us. And a lot of that messaging is not to care about what we want, right? Because I think that's an important, vital message. But it's to care about proving that we're the big bad guy on campus, so to speak, and proving that we're powerful and strong. And I think a common misconception is that strength comes from building your life on the backs of others. That's this popular narrative that we see in media and our kids might be seeing on social media. And that's why it's so important that there are books like yours available to kids and that kids are getting access not only to this, but also I think, to the messaging that you and Joe Mauer have done around the book, around the promotions to really talk about kindness, that kindness is really cool. Kindness impacts you and changes the world. It's so inspiring and necessary because if we don't model this for kids, they don't necessarily have that invitation to lean into this rather than the other messaging they're hearing.
Yeah, Schaefer, I like to say kindness is undefeated. And I kind of look at that book and the Joe Mauer story and say, I wish I would have had that when I was a kid, because I certainly was not a person. So the story, the basis of the story is Joe Mauer, who is now in the Baseball Hall of Fame. When he was a young high school athlete growing up, Joe was the best athlete from the time he was 3 years old. Joe just had this amazing God-given ability. And when Joe was in high school, he was simply the best high school athlete the state of Minnesota's ever produced. But Joe, at the lunchroom, in every lunchroom, you can think about what it was like when you sat in your high school lunchroom. Joe noticed that a young student by the name of Mike Halley was sitting by himself. Well, Mike was blind. He was new to the school and didn't have any friends, and he was easy to ignore. But Joe did not ignore them. He was very aware and intentional, and he went and invited Mike to his table. And the stories and the impact that kind move had. And Joe would walk Mike to his classes every day, and they became really good friends. I admit that part of this story was therapeutic for me because I would not have noticed Mike. I would not have probably been nice to Mike. I might even have said something smart alecky to Mike. It was just I wasn't smart enough to be kind. I really wasn't. And Joe, of all the people in campus who could have been the big shot, Joe could have walked around with 3 girlfriends on his arms and no one would have looked the other way. But Joe has this as a part of his DNA. So that story meant so much to me. And I did the research on all the impact it had on all these other people that I wrote it in my first book, Silent Impact, which is an adult book. And my publisher said, that story is so good, you have to write a children's book. So we wrote the children's book, and then it just took off from there.
It is such an impactful story. And again, I highly recommend people listen to the little snippets you can hear of Joe Schmit. I will clarify because we have 2 Joes now on this stage of Joe Schmit and Joe Mauer talking about these experiences. The humility with which Joe Mauer approaches his life is such a source of inspiration. I know for you, and it can be a source of inspiration for our children. And really going back to what we started off at the beginning of our discussion, people see someone in their current form and they think, wow, this person, this successful Hall of Famer guy is just, he's just the top of the class, so to speak. And he's so confident. He's all these things. He has it made. He's laser focused. They don't necessarily see all the work that went into doing it and all the times where he chose to bring people up with him, and the fact that that is such an integral part of true success in life is when you have the mindset for community and for bringing people with you. And so we focus on the Hall of Famer aspect of the successes in baseball. But if you listen to his incredible speech, and I have some quotes that I wrote down I wanted to bring up with you. If you listen to his speech when he accepted the award, which you predicted that he was going to get this award, and you very smartly, from a marketing standpoint, you had his book teed up to go on sale that day. Sorry for
When he
the
went to the
pun.
Hall of Fame.
Yeah, exactly. You had it ready to go. And that was so brilliant and such a great way to further the message and spread it and bring it back to kindness. The quote I wanted to share with you, I had 2 quotes. So what Joe said was, you taught me, this was to his mother, you taught me that I could be a fierce competitor, but that it's far more important to be a good person. And another thing that he said that was so impactful to me in this speech is, in baseball, you will inevitably fail more times than you succeed. You need to learn to make adjustments and have a strong determination to keep going, even when it's tough. Now, being someone who's so inspired by his life, so inspired such that you wrote a book about his life, and knowing him personally, what do those quotes bring up in you?
I have often said that, I had a broadcasting career that, went over 40 years, and I have been lucky enough to interview some of the biggest names in professional sports and Olympic sports, male and female. And I've often said that Joe Mauer is the most humble superstar I've ever met. And he lives in it. It's nothing that is pretentious. It's nothing that is fake. He does it when there aren't cameras around because it's the real deal. As I mentioned before, I really believe it's part of his DNA. And what he's done for me is inspired me to be more aware and intentional of the impact that I'm having on the world. We all get so busy that sometimes we walk right by people. We don't recognize they're there. People feel invisible today. They feel lonely today. There's so many mental health issues out there today. And if you just take the time to greet somebody, you never know when someone's having that day. You never know when the person sitting next to you is going through something heavy. And that's the day you're called upon just to acknowledge them, just to value their existence, just to make them feel like they belong. And that's what Joe has inspired me to do, trying to be just a better person. I am never going to be perfect. Joe Mauer is not perfect. But if we all try a little bit harder to make one more positive impact every single day in our life, I truly believe that it will come back in spades, so to speak. It will come back. You'll be happier. You'll be healthier. Your mental health will be better. You'll be more productive. You'll have deeper, more meaningful relationships. That's the byproduct of living this life of kindness. And, there's so much angst in society today, and so much that, you with the kids and social media, with I don't want to get into politics, but there's just, everybody's angry. And you know what? Living angry is not a way to live. Living kind is a lot better.
I love that you brought that up. This is something that my husband and I were actually just talking about yesterday on a personal level. It's so easy, again, when we talk about influence in our life and the impact it has on us, it's so easy to fall into that rut of getting sucked into the tornado of anger and of frustration. And I think as important as it is to acknowledge that you have those feelings, that made me angry, this made me frustrated. What are you going to do with it? Hop out of the tornado. And what are you going to do with it? What is the change you want to see in the world, and what impact can you have? And as you said, just smiling at someone or stopping, Joe Mauer stopping and giving an autograph, that person's going to remember that moment the rest of their life. It was 5 seconds of his time, and it made a big impact. I think one thing that we can do with listeners who have probably heard this messaging a lot because they're listening to this podcast, right? So they are interested in self-development. They are interested in mindset growth and positivity. And if they have children or students, they're interested in teaching them that. But I think it's easy to get stuck up in the ether of these discussions and not get down into the nuts and bolts of how we do that. One thing that I think is important when we're building a new way of thinking or behaving, new habits, is to acknowledge what we've already done or are doing so that we give ourselves that feedback, that positive feedback, and then we build on that. And so one thing that I do with my kids is, one, we acknowledge the bad things. Like, what mistakes did we make this week at the dinner table, at least once a week? And then we say, oh, what did you learn from that? So then we kind of get them out of that feeling, and we get into the building, the growth mindset frame. And I think that is something that people are really inspired by. And I've heard feedback, people do that now with their kids. But I think something that we are hesitant to do because it feels selfish or self-centered, but I think it's really important when we're building a life where we take those pauses and we provide that help and that positive feedback for people around us. Do we give ourselves credit for the good things we do every day? Do we stop and say, what thing am I really proud of myself for doing for someone else today? And what impact does that have? And not only having that conversation with ourselves, but the people that are in our inner circle that we could positively impact. So I want to ask you, Joe, even if it feels uncomfortable to, I've heard you say, dislocate your arm to pat yourself on the back, but even if it makes you a little uncomfortable, what is something that you did this week that you're really proud of for someone else?
That's interesting. I was lucky enough. I guess I'll say this. I had a boys golf weekend, a bunch of college buddies and some high school buddies, 12 guys. And you can imagine that, we talk golf, we talk sports, when we're not golfing, we're playing cards and games. And, it's a really male kind of thing. And men don't tend to talk, especially in groups, about feelings, about strengths, about weaknesses, about things they're trying to accomplish. So I tried to have a bunch of one-on-one conversations. That was one of my goals going in. But I actually brought the book and I gave everybody a book. And it opened up a conversation, like a serious conversation. And I just thought that was really good, because we had these men, all in their 60s, talking about kindness and talking about weakness and vulnerability and where they screwed up. And it was almost a motivational type thing for everybody, including me. And so that was that. It was like, I call it the law of unexpected consequences, where I thought, I'll just bring everybody a book. They all kind of know about it. These were people from all over the country, and that I hadn't seen for a while. So I did it and talked a little bit about it. And so I think opening up the conversation is what I'm really proud of, because I can guarantee you that if that book hadn't come out, none of us would have talked about those feelings, our strengths, our weaknesses, our issues that are going on. And then what I found out is that kind of the rest of the weekend, it was kind of the same deal. People were talking with each other and opening up and actually trying to solve each other's problems. And we were talking about, several kids that are going, of their kids or grandkids that are going through issues. And it basically made it safe to open up. So I guess if I'm proud of anything, that would be it. But I do want to go back to something that you said when you were talking about. I think that's great when you have the family conversation on, what you failed at, because we all do fail. But I do think we have to learn to forgive ourselves, because I think too many times we can beat ourselves up to the point where it's hard for us to turn it into a positive and realize that we learn from mistakes and realize that we're all human. One of the things that I try to inspire people to do is I do this one extra positive impact every day. And I tell people, if they journal, write that down. You don't want to publicize it. My God, don't put it on Facebook or anything like that. Or put it on a sticky note and throw it in a drawer or a box. And the reason I do that is because it keeps you being intentional about doing that one extra positive. I mean, we all make positive impacts every day, but the time that maybe you saw the lady at the grocery store having trouble, loading her car, and you went over there intentionally. You were in a hurry. You could have gone away, but you helped her load her groceries. Write that down. And the reason I do that is we all have those days where we feel the world's against us, where we're getting beat up on, where we feel low in self-esteem, because we're human. We all have that. And that's the day you just go and you look at that list and you'll figure out, what, I'm not that bad of a person after all. I can get through this. And guess what? A great way of getting through this is by doing one extra positive impact, doing something positive for somebody else that will help lift you up, get you out of that mood, and help you move on or move forward.
Mm-hmm. It's so true. And taking stock of those positive things you've done will just, we pay attention to what we're paying attention to, right? So if we are paying attention to the bad, we pay attention to that. And that's in part the idea of airing out the mistakes, is to not be stuck in them, right? Like, you've got to get out of the mud, right? Which, you're in the mud, you've got to get out. But then focusing on what we're going to do about it, rather than focusing on, now I'm muddy, right? It's like, oh, wow, what did we learn from this, right? And I love how you talk about essentially gathering the data points that set your focus and your trajectory on building yourself into the person you want to be, and recognizing the seed is there, right? It's already there in you. And you can flex that muscle and grow it really, really, really strong. Mixing metaphors all over the place, but whatever resonates with you, whatever resonates with you, I think is so important, to just remind yourself of your potential, that even if this moment isn't what you want it to be, it's not what the next moment has to be. So how can we redirect our focus? And you are so good at doing that with your impact-driven speech and your books. What inspired you to transition from sports broadcasting to the world of speaking, making an impact, helping people see something different in themselves and grow that?
Well, as a somewhat profile, I've been on the ABC affiliate in Minneapolis for a long, long time. I would get asked to speak a lot at athletic banquets, Rotaries, Lions clubs, charities, different events. And I would initially go out there and tell the locker room stories. What it was like to be in the locker room when the Twins won the World Series. What it was like to cover Randy Moss or covering the Masters or whatever. And I realized, and that's where I used the line, I realized I was going to dislocate my shoulder, patting myself in the back, basically bragging and name dropping left and right about what I was doing. And, just the other day, Oprah told me, Joe, you got to quit name dropping. Just kidding. Just kidding. I can't help myself sometimes to throw a bad line in there. But at one point, I decided to start telling stories about people who went the extra mile, people who were persistent, people who were making an impact without really trying to make an impact. That's how I came up with the term silent impact, where we make our biggest impressions when we're not trying to be impressive, and I started telling those stories. Well, the next thing I knew, people are telling me, Joe, you got to write a book. Joe, can you come and speak to my company? Joe, can you do this? Well, so it just kind of happened. And if I'm good at one thing, I'm able to listen to what people say. And that's, part of that being a reporter all my life. You listen to what people say so you can ask the next question. And I was able to listen to people keep telling me this stuff. And I thought, wow. And so I started my speaking journey. I happen to know a speaker by the name of Walter Bond. Walter Bond, I covered him when he was playing for the University of Minnesota basketball team. And Walter is now one of the top motivational, inspirational speakers in the country. And Walter and I had coffee, and Walter said, Joe, you got to do this. Walter, I went to a boot camp that he was throwing for emerging speakers. And the next thing I knew, I was speaking business. And now I am, speaking all over the place. In October, I'll be going, I got a couple of speeches in Australia. So I'm taking my message to Australia, which will be very exciting and very cool. So it's become a passion and my mission to just do this. It makes me feel good. I know I can make other people feel good. And if I can change one person in the audience and change their lives or get them through that day when they're having that day, then I've done my job.
I think I've said it 4 times, but repetition is really key. Listen to those speeches. Do yourself a favor and listen to them. I love having these conversations. I feel so grateful to have the opportunity to speak with someone like yourself who has so much to share. And I love the necessity before we sit down and chat together to go beyond the conversations we've had in person or me seeing you speak in person and do the deep dive and listen to all of those conversations that you've had, the Rotary Club meetings that happen to be videotaped, et cetera, the big speeches, you being on television talking about your book. And there is something so beautiful about taking a step back and learning about someone's journey and hearing them speak vulnerably about it. And so please, everyone, listen to those because there is so much to be learned here. I wanted to ask you about something that I've heard you speak about that I think is really important when we talk about what life was like for you becoming a sports broadcaster, connecting with people, networking, having mentorship, relationships, etc. And also connecting with people like Joe Mauer because of how the world was run when you met him, when you were broadcasting those reports and those games. The world of sports broadcasting was different than it is now. The way you had access or you engaged with players was different than it is now. And so my question for you was, in a world where we have a different way of accessing people. I've heard you speak about how, okay, so now there's a scheduled time that you speak to the player, and it's this player on this day. It's all very arranged. There's very little spontaneity, and there's less personal connection. In a world that is more and more that way, where we have access to social media clips, but we don't have as much access to one another to have those genuine in-person conversations, how can we still connect on a deeper level and build relationships with people?
It's a really good question. You kind of said it earlier, and you're that person. Show up, be there, and then ask questions. I always say, if you're talking about the weather, you're not talking. You know, get to know something about everybody, and you're going to find out that we're all more alike than we are different. And I think the more personal you can make it, and the more you can listen rather than talk. I always say that don't be afraid to ask the questions, but some people don't listen. Some people listen to respond instead of listening to learn. And that's a huge difference. So when you get to the point where you become a good listener, you listen to learn, that makes the conversation easier. That makes the follow-up question easier. You found out, well, what did you do this weekend? Well, I went fishing. Where'd you go fishing? I was up on Mille Lacs. Have you ever tried that restaurant up there? Oh yeah, that's great. They have the best walleye. You know where else good walleye is? So that's how a conversation goes. And it's being inquisitive, but it's also making it about them and not about you. Shafer, I tell this story, and it is not meant to draw any sympathy, but I learned a lesson. And I think the other thing is quite frankly, I think by being aware and intentional, you can learn a lot. When my mother passed away a few years back, she had your traditional, showing and at the funeral home, the old school kind of thing. And the family, we were standing there. And what really got to me, because it just hit me, because it made me realize I am changing what I do. People don't know what to say. And so people would come up to me, as my mom is, several feet away from me. And people would say, I'm sorry to hear about your mom. I remember when my mom died. And then they would go off and talk for 5 minutes about their mom, as my mom just passed away. And I said, now, a lot of people don't know what to say, but they were making it about them, not about you. So now when I go, I make sure I don't do that. Make sure you say your condolences. And then I'll say something like, what was your favorite time you ever had with your mom? What was your mom's best trait? What are you going to miss most about your mom? You make it about them, not about you. And there are a lot of people who, they'll spend you'll see them and they'll spend a half hour talking about themselves. And then they'll say, now that I'm done talking about me, why don't you talk about me for the next half hour? So if you make it about them, that's how you connect. And the next thing you know, guess what? They're going to start asking you questions about yourself and your life.
It's such important advice. And I think when we're trying to practice that, I have found, and I'm curious to hear what you think, that it's helpful to ask why, what is that feeling inside me? So I say, I'm so sorry for your loss. Let's say you found out on Facebook. Often now it's not in person that we find out about this. It's on Facebook, let's say, and you type, I'm so sorry for your loss. And then you want to type maybe 3-4 more sentences. Most of the time, if you take a pause, you delete. Because like you said, a lot of that extra information is something that you are putting out in the world to comfort yourself. And we say certain, phrases like they're in a better place now, or we say things that make us feel better. They kind of put a pin in it, right? Like, okay, I feel better because actually it's a good thing. And that person may be in a spot in their life where that is the last thing that gives them a feeling of peace because they're not there. You're trying to pull them into a place where you can feel more comfortable because they aren't upset. And I love how you are saying, no, join them in their experience. Because right now their experience is, I lost this person and I'm not at the place where I can be at peace with them being gone. I'm in a place where I'm remembering how we sat at the breakfast table, and how they supported me, and those late night calls, and all those things that make them so alive to me. And I'm trying to juxtapose the reality of them being here and not being here.
I have an idea. Just pick up the phone and call them instead of doing it on social media, or text them. And it's very easy to say thoughts and prayers, and they're in a better place. All the cliches in the world, but if you really care, make it personal. You can go back. I always think that on those things sometimes, God, we end up talking about death here. Who would have thought we'd be doing this, Shafer? But I think you kind of hit it there. Instead of saying that, you could say, I'm so sorry to hear about your dad. I remember the time we were driving in the car and your dad, we all wanted ice cream, and your dad said, we're not going to get ice cream. We're going to get sundaes, so you know what I mean? It's just that your dad was this kind of guy. So like, you tell that personal story that takes it a little bit more personal. But anyway, I know we're kind of talking about that, but it all gets down to what I had said before. It's really figure out ways to connect, figure out ways to make it about them. And that's really how you can have that impact. That's really how you can make that person feel better.
And why do we want to make an impact? Because I think most of us care so much how we make people feel. And we think that we make people feel by showing up with the best speech in the world, right? I'm the best speaker because I am just so good and I show up with the best stories. And that's a part of it, but it's more about how you made that person feel. That's what they're going to walk away with. And that's what you're so artful at doing. And that's why you're so impactful. But you're so impactful also, it just circles back to, because you're leaning into that connection and that relationship. And death is a part of all of our lives. So I think having a plan is so important, so that when we do face those conversations, that we can do so with grace and kindness, which is what you're all about.
Well, and I think we also have to be kind to ourselves. I always say that we need to be selfish before you can be selfless. And the reason I'm saying that is because if you're operating with a half a tank of gas, you can't give all the energy to somebody else that you want to, all the positive energy, because you're just surviving. You're keeping your head above water. And we all have days like that. We all have people like that and situations like that. But if you take care of yourself, you're going to be in a lot better position to take care of other people. Here's a metaphor for you, Shafer. We like metaphors. When you get on the airplane and they give the safety announcements and they say if the plane's in trouble, when the oxygen mask comes down, you put yours on first. You know why? So you can help others around you after that. If you don't put your mask on, you are going to run out of oxygen. You're going to run out of energy. So sometimes it's good to be selfish so you can be selfless, and don't be afraid to put your own oxygen mask on. Make yourself feel good. What is your escape? What's your personal pep talk? What gets you through those tough times? What helps you be resilient and tough, scrappy? All those things you have to be. This life thing is not easy. When you put it all together, there are always going to be challenges. There's always going to be failures, always going to be mistakes. But it's how you get back on the horse, to use another metaphor, or a cliche. It's how you bounce back that's going to make the difference.
Yeah, how you respond. You can't choose what happens to you, but you can choose how you respond. And if your nervous system is an absolute mess because you haven't cared for yourself, you're not capable of responding in an elevated way, in the way that best serves you and your future, and therefore the people that you care about, the people that are around you. And so that is such important messaging. And by the way, you could not be as successful in your life with all of the amazing things you do if you didn't take care of yourself. Joe Mauer, could not have been such an incredible athlete if he didn't sleep properly, eat properly, train properly, have people in his life that supported him. So it's so important. I really appreciate you saying that, because I think especially when we are in a building time of our life, it's really easy to just be really in that do, go frame of mind. We have to incorporate the self-care in there. It's not selfish. It is actually keeping you on your path. So I appreciate you mentioning that. Now, I know that, speaking of this book, that the book has taken on a life of its own. And I am so excited for the next chapter of the Right Thing to Do journey. And the thing that is so unique about it is, I know people in Minneapolis and Minnesota, they probably know this about you, but I bet there's plenty of people that don't know that not only are you and many, many, many times winning Emmy winner for your sports broadcasting and your incredible speaking, that you're also a playwright and you are a big lover of the theater. And that has been a big part of your life and your family's life for decades. Share with us how that is all kind of coming full circle with this next chapter for The Right Thing to Do.
Well, first of all, Schaefer, I have to admit that I have not always been a big theater buff at all. Um, but my wife, we had met, and she asked me out on my first date, and the first date was going to the Guthrie Theater. So I should have known at that time that there was going to be some issues there. My wife directs plays. I've had two daughters who acted, went to BFA. My one daughter runs a theater camp that my wife started. So, you know, I always say with drama, there's drama. But there are times in my life I've gone to more plays than I have sporting events. But so by happenstance, because of a connection that my wife had, my wife used to be on the board of Stages Theater, which is an award-winning children's theater in one of the suburbs in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And what happened was they got a hold of the Joe Mauer book. And Laura got an email from the director of the theater and said, we want to make this into a play. Well, long story short, they're making it into a major musical production. They've hired a guy by the name of Michael Mahler, who took the book series Diary of a Wimpy Kid and turned it into a musical. And he's the person they hired to do the music and the rewrite of the play into a musical. And I'm on the development team. And it's been an amazing process. The play is going to debut in April of 2026. We're working on a huge fundraiser with it. We have a documentary team. We're trying to raise money to do a documentary on it. It's because of all the things that have happened because of this one act of kindness. A charity started because of this. A woman was inspired that she started a charity for junior high and high school kids. It's now in 7 school districts, and we put together a video for them. 20,000 schools have seen this video, and they've started a program called No One Sits Solo based on Joe and Mike's story. Find the kid that's sitting by themselves at lunch and invite them to your table. So inspiring this younger generation. But it's really cool. It was the law of unintended consequences once again. And I'm just sitting back, enjoying this ride, going, what is going to happen? It's been amazing. It's been kind of emotional, when all of a sudden you go to the read through of the play, and they come up with the song, "The Right Thing to Do," which is your book. It's a little mind blowing. And I sat there in that room and said, how did this happen and how did I get here?
I think that's the gift of leading with kindness and connection, is we can't achieve greatness alone with our ideas, our grand ideas of what we want to do. Like, we can only achieve our highest potential when we are connecting with others in a like-minded way and growing the initiative, which you've done. And like you said, all these unintentional consequences that are touching so many lives. And I can tell you, for one, my daughter is so excited for the musical, and we're already planning our trip to come see it when it first starts because she is so excited. She was blessed to meet you and your lovely wife when you were reading your book, The Right Thing to Do. I'll keep showing it here. When you were reading your book on Kidlit TV, which is a great way for, if you're curious about the book and you want to share it with your classroom, your library, a great way to share the book as well as the other programs that Joe has mentioned today. And she met you both there. That was fall of 2024 in New York City at the Kidlit TV studios, which is, by the way, one of my favorite places on earth. Talk about a positive environment, happiness, and love of literature. It's just stunning, a stunning experience. But my daughter, Amelie, who's also an author, and she was talking about her book there and reading her book. She was so inspired by you, by your story, by your wife also, who was so excited to talk about the theater production, which was, I think, in much earlier stages then. This was almost a year ago, because these things, they take time to grow and nourish to become what they're truly meant to be. And the fact that in this fast-paced life where it's so easy to make a reel and put it out and, do the quick talk and move on, you're not just doing those things, but you are creating projects that they do take more effort from you and from this incredible team of people that you mentioned behind it, but also will have a really big impact. And I think that's an important lesson to impart upon people. Don't be afraid to not just lean into the quick gratification, but to really invest in yourself and building your dreams, because that's where your impact just really compounds and grows.
I think we live in a society today that is about convenience and shortcuts. And, anything worthwhile usually does not have convenience and shortcuts. It has some hurdles to jump over and some mountains to climb, some issues that come up that you don't think are going to happen. And you just have to keep grinding and you just have to keep pushing it forward. I want to just say one line that the quality of this play and this music is amazing. Because what happened is I lined up Michael Mahler with Joe Mauer and Mike, the blind student. Some of the kids sat around that table. So Mike had a good overview as he kind of takes the book and makes it into a play. And he has a line in there where Mike is singing a song. And it just hit to my core. He said, I may be blind, but I just want to be seen. And that was Mike sitting by himself at that table. And I thought, how many other people out there just want to be seen? I just want to feel like they belong. The Surgeon General came out with a report on loneliness. And I'll probably have the stat wrong, but loneliness is as bad for your health as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. Something on that line. And it was, loneliness is epidemic in this world. I don't think social media has helped it. I think social media has hurt it because of the connections and one-on-one conversations that are lacking today. So I just think that there's power in throwing goodness out in the world, and you never know what's going to happen. And sometimes some pretty amazing things happen.
Joe, I so appreciate you being here to spread the word of kindness. I hope that people are not only inspired in this moment and just feeling those good emotions, but also thinking, what next? What can I do in my life? What simple steps can I take today, tomorrow, to do something that's kind, that has a positive impact? And if you are invested in doing that and focusing your energy, you will see such dividends return on your investment in kindness and yourself and in your positive mindset. So I'm so appreciative of you spreading this word. I want to encourage listeners to connect with you, what is the best way for people to get the book, access your speaking that you've already done, and also hire you to come to their event and inspire their people?
I have a website. It's it's joeschmit.com, and it's SCHMIT. My email is pretty simple. It's joe@joeschmit.com. I'll answer emails. I'll do whatever I can. Um, we we've had some donors donate money so we can give books to schools. We've been able to do some really good things because of people's generosity. And by the way, we didn't mention 100% of the proceeds of this book go to 2 charities, including the one that started Thumbs Up for Mental Health. And we've been able to donate $150,000 so far to these 2 charities. So it's been amazing. And yeah, please get a hold of me. Have any questions or comments, or if you want to see the play, or if you want to dive into the documentary with us, we're always looking for things, just ways to make this, reach more people, because we know the power of it.
Always impact driven. And that is why I just adore you so much. I'm so grateful to have you here and sharing your message. Would you mind if I read the last 2 books of the page? Will you copyright infringement me?
No,
Last 2
not at
pages
all.
of the book,
Please do.
rather?
Please do.
Because I love it, and I hope that it will encourage. I think actually it encourages people to read the whole book, because you want to know the story behind this when you think about, again, someone like Joe Mauer. So I just love the last 2 pages of the book, and it says, he spent a lot of time helping others in the community. Joe not only was a superstar athlete, he was also a superstar friend to everyone he met. It was just the right thing to do. And Joe, you are a superstar friend to everyone you meet. And I thank you for your friendship and for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you, Shafer. You're a blessing. And I've done a lot of these podcasts, but this one was the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate it so much. It's been a blessing to have you here and just to have you in our lives. Storytellers, it's been wonderful to have you here. We so appreciate your time and you investing in yourself and your growth. Until next time, stay safe and take care. I'll talk to you soon.